Whitman Environment. We just spoke with Katie King, the president of the Campus Climate Challenge. Katie is a senior and has been involved with activism for her 4 years here at Whitman. But what does student activism look like from a more permanent perspective, like from a tenured perspective? To answer this question, I spoke with Phil Brick, a politics and environmental studies professor.
Tell me a little bit about the environmentalism you see among students on the Whitman campus.
I see students coming to Whitman being very green. Whitman seems to attract that kind of student. It's reflected, I guess, in the strength of the environmental studies program we have here and the strength of the outing program. And a lot of the student sort of green interest, I think, centers around sort of their understanding of protection of nature.
You said before that there's a lot of incoming Whitman students that are sort of greenies. Do you see students generally entering Whitman being kind of idealistic, or do they generally have both feet on the ground?
At the end of the film, what is it? Intermixed with the end credits are all the little things one could do to, okay, now that I've woken up, what do? Well, I can buy a Prius, or I can recycle more. I can write first person. I can change a light bulb. I can do all these little things. Well, these things are great, but they're not the structural changes that are necessary really to climate change in any substantive way. And I don't think Whitman students are any different from anyone else. They come with a green sensibility. I think that's great, but there's a question of, well, how do I direct that green sensibility into the kinds of changes that are going to be necessary for substantive changes in climate change policy. One of the things I think that has happened, again, with the Campus Climate Challenge, but also with student activism on campus, I hope to see next year a lot of the student interest in the 2006 elections. I'm hoping that...
2008?
I'm sorry, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm always a couple of years behind the times. With for the first time in a long time, we have a truly competitive election. The good news is that on climate change issues, all three of the candidates are well ahead of Mr. Bush. So
they'd have to be.
Well, probably. But I think that see more debate about climate change. Unfortunately, I don't think climate change will be at the top of the agenda. The economy, healthcare, the war in Iraq, those are going to be at the top of the agenda. But there are good ways in which climate change can be part of the conversation about energy policy, national security, and of course our foreign policy.
In any ways, do you see groups like the Campus Climate Challenge being more symbolic than really adding momentum, in the sense that it's sort of the campus equivalent of buying a Prius?
I don't really see that. I mean, I see it a little bit, but buying a Prius is an individual consumer act, just as buying a light bulb and screwing it in and actually doing that and talking about it or thinking about it, but actually going and doing it. That's different than getting together with your peers to have regular meetings, to have regular strategy sessions, to have events, to put stuff on, to do things together. See the difference between I think the difference between that individual consumer act and the sort of collective organization with fellow students to get something done. Yeah, all educational events are symbolic in some way, or showing a film is symbolic, but having discussions in terms of, are you actually reducing the carbon that's being thrown into the atmosphere directly by activities? The answer is no. You might be producing a lot of hot air, which contributes to carbon in the atmosphere, metaphorically, of course. But I don't think that's the point. The point is that if you want to really make a difference in climate change policy, it's becoming politically active, and certainly campuses are great places to be politically active. And I do think that it matters what happens on colleges' campus. When nothing's happened on colleges' campuses, I think it's easy for people to assume that, well, everything is fine. But there's a little bit of unrest on campuses that gets people's attention, and it can be a spark for a different kind of debate and different policy outcomes.
Are you familiar with the essay Death of Environmentalism?
Yes.
and the idea that the way that the environmental movement is set up right now, it's fundamentally not prepared to deal with climate change. What kind of advocacy do you think could happen to or depoliticize that?
I think the basic message of their book, Breakthrough, is good in the sense that it's really telling us that if you want to think about what will be necessary to really address the climate carbon issue, it's going to take some kind of new politics. The question is the old environmental movement so stale, so tired, so exhausted, so ideologically vacuous that it cannot possibly meet that challenge. They say yes. Environmentalism, as we've known it, should die so something better can replace it. The problem with Schellenberg's have come up is that they haven't articulated that something better might be. But what their argument, which I think is a good one, is that there's going to need to be some new way about climate change that's has to be more aspirational, and to build a much wider constituency for carbon legislation, for sort of reindustrialization, and by reindustrialization I mean sort of the green reindustrialization of the country, which I think holds tremendous promise, and we're seeing glimmers of this already in energy sectors, particularly in renewable energy sectors. A lot of venture capital going into biofuels and solar energy. And
what kind of policies do you see make differences that you were talking about before? Kind of cap and trade, of carbon tax? What would work?
Heavy investment, government research and development, and investment in and encouraging anything that can be done to encourage investment in renewables would be a good thing. And then you combine that with carbon taxes and cap and trade. Those two aren't mutually exclusive. The important thing is, if we ever do get to a point where energy becomes cheap, that you want to make sure that the basement price for oil, for example, doesn't slip below a certain level, because at that point then all the investment you've done in making energy, say, wind power, say, competitive at, 8 to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, if all of a sudden oil gets very cheap again and you can produce power from imported oil at 4 kilowatt hour or 5 cents or 6 cents, then you've completely undermined all the investment you put in to make the other ones feasible. So guaranteeing some kind of basement price, that the price in which energy can't sink below, is a good thing. So the combination of cap and trade, carbon tax, and then a very substantial investment in research and development would be the place to start. And I think that research and development should be worldwide too. It shouldn't just be in this country.
So in the fall, when a new group of freshmen greenies show up and they're Lorax environmentalists that plant trees and ride their bikes, what would you recommend or want to see them to do to actually make a difference?
Well, I hope they again, not think of activism as something that is done individually, but by screwing in a light bulb and so forth. When you're a student, you don't own a house, and so you don't have those kinds of things to think about so much. And your commutes are short. You walk pretty much to school, or you ride your bike, or if they're in